where we left off here then, right? So we got as far as adding our many to many, right? Just pointing out here, in a couple pages in, and sure enough, I found a few that we only added a single, right? So we've done this kind of code before, right? Where we did it for the medical history as well and things like that. So when there's more than one, okay, we can have the little classable div and so on and so forth, right? Same kind of thing on details, same kind of thing on delete and so on and so forth. Okay, well, that's all good. But what we really need to do now is focus on edit and create. We need to actually be able to assign or change the specialties of a doctor, et cetera, right? So that's going to be our next little bit of work we're going to do together. So continuing on in the same 12.1 step copy paste file, okay, we need to now think about the edit and create, right? So maybe I'll clean up this a bit. I'll get rid of the 3 views that we're done with. Okay, don't need the doctor anymore either. I did remember finally to add my annotation there. Okay, so working in the controller now, right? It's going to be similar to what we did with the checkboxes. Remember, we added a couple of extra methods. We added extra methods altogether. I'm going to control MO just to shrink everything down so I can easily navigate where I am in the controller. And I'm going to add them in right here. We have 2 as well, but you know, they're a little bit different from what we did with checkboxes. And I have to be honest, to me, they actually seem a little easier to understand and work with, which is another reason why I kind of like this approach as opposed to text boxes. Okay. The only kind of negative about this approach is we do rely on a little bit of JavaScript on the client side. But the truth is we're using JavaScript on the client side for lots of stuff. So it's really not that big a deal. Okay, so the first one here is our populate, okay, assigned specialty data. Similar to what we did with checkboxes, we just get our doctor. Now, a note here, we must have included the child collections of the parent object. So when we pass this doctor in, we want to make sure we already did the dot include and then include, right? So it has all that information. Okay, then we come and direct to the database and we get all the specialties there are, right? That's all of our options. Then going to the doctor, we go into because we included it, the doctor specialties collection, okay, and we get the specialty ID of each and every one. And that's our current options, right? And that's it. So we now have all of them. We have the ones that the doctor currently has. So what we're going to do is we're going to build 2 separate lists, selected and available. Now they're both just empty lists here of our list option view model objects. And now we're going to populate them. So our for each loop goes through all the options, okay, that we just got from the database. So S is each one as we go through, okay, and we check whether the doctor currently has, okay, does it contain this particular ID, right? Oh, if it does, right, uh, then we're going to make sure we add it, okay? So we add it to the selected list, right? Uh, by generating a new list option view model object where the ID is the actual ID and the specialty name is our display text. Else, okay, they don't have it, right? Well, then it's going to go into the available lists, right? It's not one they have, it's not currently in the selected list, but it should then be in the available list. By the time we're done looping through, every option will be in one of the 2 different lists, right? Selected or available. Then down here, we just create 2 multi-select lists. It's very much like a select list. In fact, I believe you could even check out the word multi here and the whole thing would still work, okay? They're really just select lists, but it gives a bit of extra awareness to the system that you might in some cases allow multiple selecting. Anyway, all right, so here's our actual link query then. So I just go to my selected collection, but here's a perfect spot to actually add some sorting, right? Anytime something appears in a list, it's usually good practice to make sure it's a sorted list, right? So people can scan up and down alphabetically and find things more easily. Otherwise, have to look at each and every line, right? If it's not in any order. So we'll just order it by the display text, okay? And then that puts it in alphabetical order. So each list will do the same thing. Of course, the ID is the internal value, and then the display text is what's shown inside the list itself. So both of those, the selected options and available options, are added to view data. Now, since we're here, we might as well talk about the update process as well, right? So imagine what's happened. Okay, we sent all this down to the client. They've chosen, move things back and forth between the lists. So when they click their post button, okay, or their button to submit, right, in the post action, we get all the selected options. Okay, I'm not going to worry about the other ones. I'm just worried about the ones that were selected, right? So it'll be a string array of all the selected options. And of course, we have our doctor to update, which as well will have all the includes in place. So what do we do? Well, if selected options is null, so there's nothing selected, well, saves me even worrying about what do they used to have. I don't care what they used to have, right? All I care is the fact that now there's nothing there, right? So I can just assign it to a new empty list. And when I save this to the database, Entity Framework will look at it and say, oh, that's it. Nothing for us to do, right? We'll just actually delete any that are there, and that make sure that the doctor has no specialties assigned. Okay, of course, the more common cases is at least something selected, right? So now we deal with that situation. So we'll get our selected options hash set. So that's just our selected options as a hash set of strings. And then similarly, our current options, the ones that doctor currently has. Okay, so we go to the doctor update, grab the ones that they currently have, their doctor specialties, selecting the specialty IDs, right? And that's our current options. Then again, we go through all of them from the database. Okay, context.specialties, right? It goes and gets it from the database. We consider each one, and we check, does the selected options contain it, right? So it's selected, okay? And then, okay, so it was selected by the user. Is it currently in the doctor's records, right? If it's not, we have the bang there, which reverses the logical, like true, false, okay? If it's not currently one that the doctor has, right, then we actually have to add it. So we go to doctor specialties, add a new doctor specialty object using the values we have for the specialty ID and for the doctor's own ID, right? And that's it. So we've added it because they selected it and it wasn't there. Now the else branch, okay, is not selected. Well, that's fine, but we have to make sure, did it used to be in the doctor's list of accreditations, right? So if in the current options, if it contains it, okay, well, they must have deselected it then, right? They don't want that one to be one of the ones that's selected, so we have to remove it. So to do that, we actually create a doctor specialty object, okay, as spec to remove, and then we call dot remove on the DB context to actually delete it. And that is pretty straightforward, right? It's actually almost, as I said, a little bit easier to follow and understand than the approach we did with checkboxes. So, if you like this better, go ahead and use this instead in most circumstances. Okay, so that's it for the actual little helper methods we're going to add, but we actually have to incorporate them now into the actual create and edit process. Okay, so let's come now to the create get. Okay, right now it's as simple can be. All we're doing is saying return view with an empty model. Okay, now we've seen in the past that sometimes what we do is we'll actually create a new one of the objects. Okay, in this case it would be a doctor object in case there are any default values so they can appear on the screen as well. Well, we're going to follow that same kind of approach. Okay, in order to add data into our view data, right? So I'll create a doctor. So it's a brand new doctor. So obviously there'd be nothing assigned, okay, in terms of a many-to-many relationship because the doctor didn't exist till just now. So when we call populate assigned specialty data, its collection will be null, all right, and it will not actually have anything in the selected. Everything will be in the available column. Now we could actually throw the doctor in here, but it really doesn't matter at this stage if we do or not. Okay, doesn't hurt. I don't have it in my copy paste code, but it doesn't hurt having it there as well. That's useful. Again, as a technique if there were any default values, which there aren't, right? So it really doesn't matter, but I can show it that way if I want. Okay, now we come down to the post for create, right? So here is where we have to add an additional parameter because we need in code to be able to easily access and work with, okay, the selected, just gonna press enter here. I love how Visual Studio fixes that up with a concatenate and so on to continue on, right? We'll have a comma and then a string array of selected options, right? So of course that's going to be the name of the actual list control, right? So it'll be the selected options come in with this one collection of all the ones that were selected. Okay, so we already have our try, catch, and so on. But what we're going to do is before we check validation, we're going to call our update, right? We'll call update doctor specialties. Okay, we have the selected options. We have the doctor, okay, because the doctor was constructed here from the data coming from the client. Now, at this stage in time, of course, other than the selected options, like this doctor object has just the first, middle, last name in it, right? So there's no includes to worry about because we didn't actually get it from the database. We got it from the view itself, okay? So what else do we have to change in here? Well, there is one more critical thing. Remember, this is now a hierarchical object. After we've called our update doctor specialties, any of the ones that were selected have been added as doctor specialty objects inside the corresponding collection for them inside of our doctor model, right? So when it goes to save it, Entity Framework is so smart, it will say, oh, that's a hierarchical object, so we need to do this in a transaction, right? And so whenever you have a transaction, it might roll back, okay, if records are locked or for whatever reason it can't complete the transaction, right? So we have a retry limit, okay? It'll usually try, I believe it's 5 times. I've mentioned that before. And if it fails to complete the whole save operation as a large transaction, then we'll get this exception raised. And we can say unable to save changes after multiple attempts, go away, right? And that's that. Oh, also don't forget though, if we're going to end up redisplaying the data on the screen, maybe there's a validation error, right? Then we have to make sure we populate the assigned specialty data again. Have the data ready in view data to show in the 2 list boxes on the screen. Okay, just moving on in the edit get, very similar ideas here, right? We make sure that our link query where we get the doctor, that we actually are getting the doctor with all the includes, right? Don't lose my await because this is asynchronous. Okay, and before we return view, right, we'll make sure we actually populate the assigned specialty data. So we have the view data in the 2 lists to display on the screen. Not too much of a change there. Once more though, coming down to the edit post, here's where the data will come back from the client. So we need our selected options string array as a parameter, okay, to the actual method, right? So we only have the ID there, so I'll put comma, string array, selected options. Okay, now we're just doing a singular default, but we know by now we definitely want, right, to actually go and get the doctor including all of this related information. Okay, including the doctor specialties, then including the specialty, and away we go. All right, now once more, we'll do it right before our check for validation. Okay, we'll call update doctor specialties, passing in the selected options that came in from the user, their choices, and of course the doctor to update that includes the specialty information. All right, so again, the only thing we have to worry about inside the try catch here is we have the additional catch block in case there was a retry limit exceeded exception, right, on the transaction that the system will generate for us. And that's it, except for once more, before we redisplay, if case there is a validation error message, we once more want to populate the assigned specialty data. And that's it. Those are all the changes we have to actually make to our controller. So it's just a matter of getting the 2 list boxes up on the screen, right, in the actual UI. Now for that, I've mentioned earlier, we need to use some JavaScript, right? We need to use a bit of JavaScript so we can, have that functionality on the client side of moving things back and forth between the 2 lists. So we touched on this before, that way up here is our W root. This is the root folder for the website itself, which is where we have things like our extra CSS we add for our site, JavaScript we might add, all the libraries, Bootstrap, jQuery, and so on. This is all under W root, right? So anything we want to add that's directly accessible in HTML, right, goes in here. So I could kind of add it into site.js it would work, but the trouble is this gets included on every page. And there's only a few pages where I'm actually going to need this code for managing moving things back and forth, right, between two select lists. So that is not probably the best solution. Instead, I'm going to make my own separate little JavaScript file that I'll just include only on the pages that actually use it or need it, right? So I can right click this folder. I have to hold my tongue in the right place, I guess. There we go. Add a new item. And I could search for it in a number of ways. But if I go to web, I know it's in this list. I'm looking for a JavaScript file, right? So that's what I want. But I'm going to give it the name multiselect just because I can. And it makes sense to me, multiselect, right? Now, you can write this with jQuery. You see, we already have support for jQuery in place. But of course, most modern browsers now support ECMAScript. Most of you have had Marsha. Don't you love Marsha? I love Marsha. Marsha's great, and she's really good at keeping up with all of the latest versions of the JavaScript in the JavaScript world, the latest ECMAScript stuff, and so on and so forth. Uh, I'm kind of I confess, still a bit of an old-fashioned jQuery kind of guy. And I'm a little bit more comfortable with it, but I'm trying to get onto it. So I'm trying to follow along with Marsha as she blazes forward on the latest and greatest JavaScript styles. And she wrote this for me. So I want to give credit to her. So she said, no, you know what, Dave? Yeah, actually, I approached her and I said, I really should update this and get away from jQuery, I suppose. And she said, well, let me help you out. So she kind of wrote this for me in the newer style, right? So basically, we have our we're getting our document by element by ID, right? Selected options and available options. Okay, so those are the ones that are chosen and available. Okay, this switch just looks after sending back and forth between the two. And down here we have our events, okay, when we add options and remove options. And of course, down here is the listener for the buttons to click. So the main thing I want to point out to you now is not so much how the JavaScript works, but there's certain key things we need to be aware of. We have to literally use these IDs, okay? So if we have a button to move things like left and right between two that are sitting beside each other, we have to make sure they actually have ID equals button left, ID equals button right. Even our submit button has to have ID equals button submit, and so on, right? In order for this code to actually properly work. Same here for the lists themselves. They have to have the IDs, selected options, available options, right? So when you're constructing the actual HTML, make sure you follow those rules and you'll be fine. By the way, I do actually, in the bottom of my copy paste file, I have the old version that I wrote using jQuery that does the same thing, but I figured we might as well try to keep up with things. So here it is with ECMAScript. Okay, so that's good. We're going to reuse this then on pages where we need it, right? Okay, so finally we're ready to actually put the HTML elements on the page, okay? By the way, to actually have that script available on each page, that'll be the next thing. So let me close the controller. So coming down to the views, the two that I'm concerned about is for Docker, create and edit. So in each one, if I go to the bottom, here's a section called scripts. Remember, we talked about this before, but how that works is right here in our layout, underscore layout, okay, that partial view that actually is the frame, so to speak, the framework for every one of our views, right? Because the view actually gets put in here in render body. But at the bottom was this render section, okay? What section? The script section, right? So that gets rendered right here. So anything in any of our views where the section is named scripts, okay, then that script gets added into that one page in this spot in our partial view. Okay, so that's why we can come in here and add more script. If this is the page that wants to use it, I can just add it here. Now I could just copy the whole thing, but I've got it saved, right, in the JS folder, multiselect.js. So that will pull that script in and include it on the one page. I'm going to do the same thing here for create. There we go. All right. By the way, if you're wondering about this again, we looked at it once before, validation scripts partial. Okay. Well, that is a partial view, which is no longer something that you're unfamiliar with. Okay. Validation scripts partial is here in the shared folder. So it really just has two script libraries, right, to do with jQuery validation. Okay. Instead of hard coding these two lines in, they put it in a partial view so they could just refer it with one line. Lazy programmers. No, 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 no. It's good programming. Okay, so here's my multi-select. So now we'll actually have the script there for managing it, but we have to actually add the HTML, right? Okay, so inside the edit view, okay, let's come to that one next, right? Up here earlier, do I want to replace it all and be safe, or try to be fancy and show you what I want to do here? I guess I'll try to be fancy this first time, right? So basically we have our row, we've talked about that, and we have a column, okay, of width 4 out of the 12, right? It comes down here and everything is in the one column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end that column after the first, middle, and last name, right? And I'm going to start a new column using up the rest of the screen width, okay? So I put that slash div to end the column, right? We're starting a new column of width 8. Remember, there's 12 in total. So that'll give me the rest of the screen over to the right. Okay, so here I'm going to add another row inside of it. Actually, I'm going to replace right down to here so that I don't mess up. Okay, and inside it, I'm going to divide that in half, right, with 2 columns of width 6, sticking always with the medium screen size, right? So if I get below the medium screen size, it will actually all go vertical, and that's fine too, right? But if it's medium or above, then it will separate it into columns. So 6 and 6 adds up to 12. Now this whole row, okay, fits inside of, oh, I think I replaced too much there. Whoops. I'm missing my column for MD8. And I'm probably missing a closing div down here then. Oh no, I had it, but it's just not indented properly. That's all. Okay. All right. So there we go. And that one should be in too. Okay. So this is a column of width of 8. Okay, makes up with this one of 4 to give us 12 there. But we're dividing this half, or a bit more than half, 2/3, I guess, into 50/50, 6 and 6, giving us 12. So what do we have in each half here? Well, we have a basically a list box, right? Notice the names have to match what we're expecting in our jQuery. Now you can change this for different many-to-many relationships, right? But mostly you're going to leave this code the same. Really, it's just these labels, right? Specialties accredited, choose specialties, right? So if it's not specialties, then here's where you'd say something else, right? Maybe you were choosing, I don't know, a many-to-many between um, a student's favorite colors, right? Uh, so you might have uh, chosen colors and or favorite colors, okay, is the name of this one, and colors to choose from as the name over here as that label. But anyway, critical IDs, button right, button left, okay. The ID of course of the select lists available and selected options, right? The other thing that we did, I think it should be in here in my copy paste, is we set the ID of the actual submit button to button submit. That's so before it actually submits the form, we get a chance to grab that event in JavaScript, okay, and make that final change of making sure everything in the selected options is actually selected. Otherwise, it doesn't get sent over to the actual client. Okay, so that's it for the edit view. We'll just come to the create. Very much the same code goes in place here, right? Um, so I'll just come after the last name, right? So we end that column. We make a new column of width 8, divided into 2 columns of 6, and all of the same code with our submit button, all the IDs in place that we need. And that should work, okay? So let's give it a test. Drum roll. Okay, so let's come to doctors. I'll pick on Gregory House here. We'll edit, and there we go. So we see all the ones that are currently selected. Now this came from seed data, obviously, and all the others, all these specialties here, right? I can do this. If I pick the first one, select them all, click my plus sign, they've all moved over, right? So now they're all in here, okay? So when I click save, notice very quickly, everything in here will turn gray. It'll be selected. That's being done with our JavaScript so that it all gets passed over when we submit. And there we go, 64. Look at that. We got 64 specialties. Woo! Look at them all. Okay, let's go back to edit. That's maybe a bit ridiculous. Okay, so I'm going to pick everything but one, move them over to the choose specialties. So now Gregory House only has one, right? And so that's what we see there looking on the index, right? So it doesn't need a collapsible div at all because it just fits on one screen. And of course, if we edit, take that one out even, then we're down to 0, right? Shows nothing here, and back on here, it's blank. Okay, we can test that it works in Create as well. I don't know why I always do that. Just so keen to get it in there. Okay, and I'll just pick a couple, any couple, click Save, and there we go. So there are my specialties, right? Back to the doctor list. Now I'll probably be on the last page, okay, at this point in time. And there they are. All right, so we're successfully creating and editing across the many-to-many, and that's good. Okay. The next lesson is finally, what if we wanted to search and find all the doctors, for example, that are accredited in forensic pathology, right? We only want to see the doctors that have that as one of their skills, as one of their specialties, or hand surgery or whatever, right? How could we actually do that? And that's going to be our next lesson.